Yo, so guys, welcome back to another video reaction, and this is another sort of accent type reaction. I did one a long time ago, but the video was kind of sus, and it wasn't. I feel like it was just a bit off with like the sort of pronunciations, and it was just sort of forced kind of accents. It wasn't like genuinely sort of looking into like what people from the US, like wherever you're from, what states people are from, genuinely sound like. Again, it was just sort of like the put on accents by people not actually from those countries. And I don't know, I got this video suggested a lot. I'm actually 15 seconds in. I got this video suggested a lot, and yeah, I've been getting a lot of Instagram messages, a lot on Instagram and a lot through YouTube as well. And I know I will enjoy this video, but I just appreciate the fact that people have been suggesting this a lot. And the exact video is called Accent Expert Gives a Tour of US Accents Part 1 Wired. And this is a channel that I've heard of. Are they like a big Twitter account or something? Wired? What are Wired? Aren't they like GQ? Wait, is Wired like GQ? Am I waffling right now? Maybe not. Maybe not. I don't really know. It doesn't really matter. Really. But yeah, let's get into this. Hopefully you guys are going to enjoy. Links to my Instagram, links to my Twitter in the description, links to my second channel as well for those interested. But let's get into this one. Let's check what this video has to offer.
New York City, Trenton, North Carolina, Ocracoke Island, Mississippi, and northern Florida. That's where you get the sort of Blanche Dubois, Scala O'Hara kind of classical Southern accent. Hi, my name is Eric Singer. I'm a dialect coach. Today we're going to take a little tour of some of the different accents of English-speaking North America. Now, a couple of quick disclaimers. These are by no means all the accents in North America or even all the English-speaking ones. And not everyone from the same place sounds the same. Accents vary by socioeconomic background, generation, ethnicity, and race, and all kinds of individual factors. Because in a very real way, accent is identity. Different people from the same place have more or less localizable accents, and that usually has to do with identity too. Now, on some of our stops, we're going to be looking at some of the most distinctive and interesting local features, but it doesn't mean that everyone from there has that accent or has it to the same degree. I'm also going to have some linguists and language experts from around the continent join me today to lend their expertise in some of these areas.
Hi, I'm Megan Figueroa.
Hi, I'm Nicole.
Peace. I'm Sun Michaud.
Hi, I'm Kalina.
Hi, I'm Imani Doran.
One of the things you'll notice along the way is that accents often don't follow political boundaries, especially ones like state lines. They'll follow major geographical boundaries, things like mountains for sure, but what regional accent differences mostly reflect is settlement patterns and contact.
I guess
Historically
people
isolated
are sort of
communities, like
so split off in terms of like people who live on one side of the mountain and people who live the other side. They're actually so far from each other. It's like they're from not different countries, but especially back in the day, it would be like they're just meeting people from, like, again, a different country, because again, 100, 200 years ago, there'd be no sort of transport like planes and stuff to like for like as close as you actually are. And because of the size of the mountains, etc., that actually does make sense. But it is just interesting how mountain ranges can sort of define accents. When you think about it, it's crazy.
Like Ocracoke Island in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, or the Sea Islands in the Lowcountry in Georgia, can have really distinctive speechways. They've had the time and isolation necessary to diverge and develop them. That's the other thing that makes for accent variety. Time. There's a lot more accent diversity in the British Isles, for example, where there are local populations.
Bro, how is there a country so damn small that has accents so diverse here? You get somewhere like, I'm looking north, Scouse, Mancunian, Teesside, Geordie, and then you've got like, wait, where is it? East Anglia, Norfolk. See, I'm from Norfolk, yeah, but I've not got a Norfolk accent. I don't even know what a Norfolk accent is. I think it's quite sort of farmerish, but I've not got the accent, so I don't really have, because my parents aren't actually from here, so maybe that's why. Like, I've got a mix of their accents, but it's just, I don't know, it's strange. You've got London Cockney. It's just crazy how these accents in such a small area have such variety and stuff.
That have been speaking English in their particular way for hundreds and hundreds of years. And there's more accent diversity on the east coast of the US than there is west of the Mississippi.
What?
It's been settled by English speakers longer. The first places English was spoken in North America were Roanoke, Jamestown, and of course, Plymouth, Massachusetts, where the Pilgrims landed in 1620. So let's start there. The Pilgrims spoke with what we call rhotic accents, meaning they said all their R's. In fact, so did almost all English speakers in 1620, including the ones in England. That's right, the Southern English accent might have used to sound something like this.
It's actually quite good.
It was only in the late 18th century that fashionable young people in and around London started dropping their R's, and from there the trend spread to America. Now, north of Plymouth Rock,
wow.
we have Harvard Yard. One of the places you might hear a Boston accent today. A stereotypical
Boston. It's just the W in front of the B. I don't know why I always imagine it like that. Is it from previous videos that I've seen, or is it actually from hearing people from Boston speak? I don't really know.
Boston accents, of course, are non-rhotic, meaning no R sounds in park your car in Harvard Yard. Let's all get in the car and head south down the coast now into Rhode Island. Traditional Rhode Island accents here are still non-rhotic, but there's a key vowel difference. The placement for that vowel sound in park your car in Harvard Yard. We call this the start vowel. In Boston, it's usually pretty fronted. Park your car in Harvard Yard. In Rhode Island, it's back. Park your car in Harvard Yard. Rhode Island accents were shaped by a lot of Irish and Italian immigration.
It's crazy to me because they're not even that far from each other either.
Just like New York City. So many accents. They don't vary by borough, by the way. That's a myth.
That is actually really good. See, that's the typical one you sort of... I can just sort of picture. What was the show? What was the Netflix show? Power? The one with 50 Cent? And like the characters, I don't know if the accents are just forced on them, because you know like in certain shows they'll force certain accents so you know where it is. Or if that is just how the typical sort of person from New York will sound. Like it's one of those sort of accents I just instantly associate it with the mafia, which is probably because of the films. But
I know you guys are going to tell me to forget about it, but I'm sorry. Sociolinguists have studied this really carefully, and there just really isn't any such thing as a specifically Brooklyn, a specifically Bronx accent. There certainly are a lot of different New York City accents, but they vary by socioeconomic background and by ethnicity and other aspects of group belonging and identity, more than by neighborhood or by borough. They're historically non-rhotic, though that's changing some in the youngest generations for sure. Here's something fun most of them have in common. The tongue tip hits the teeth, or close to them, on TD and N sounds instead of, a little further back. So you can hear that in like this kind of New York City accent, tongue tip on the teeth, Times Square, New York City, and this kind of New York accent, 22nd Street, Times Square, Dumbo, taxis, traffic, and so on. Okay, so you may have noticed that all of these accents I've talked about so far sound pretty white. I'm going to take a pause here, and linguist Nicole Holliday is going to go a little deeper on African-American English varieties. My colleague, Amani Dorn, is going to demonstrate some of those accents.
Hi, I'm Nicole Holliday, and I'm a linguist. As we know, New York has all kinds of people in it. African-American English has a lot of shared features across regions because of its history. So Black people in Africa were kidnapped and brought to what is now the United States. At the time, they didn't all speak the same languages. They spoke multiple different African languages. And those languages came into contact not only with each other, but those languages were also coming into contact with the English spoken by the colonizers. So this created a situation where there was a really unusual learning exposure to English, right? So there are all of these languages in contact with each other. And for economic and survival reasons, the enslaved people had to, in some ways, acquire English. But the English that they were acquiring was not like what you learn in the classroom, right? It was under this really unusual situation of acquisition. So some of the features that we see in modern African-American English are a result of this contact between the African languages as well as the English spoken by colonizers, and those features have persisted over generations. After slavery was legally ended, the majority of African Americans remained in the South but experienced really extreme segregation. This led to different varieties of English being spoken in Black and white communities within the South, and even as they moved north during the Great Migration.
Nicole, how did the Great Migration influence accents?
The English that we see today spoken by African Americans has some features that have persisted throughout generations. TH stopping, so that might be using something like a D sound for where you see a written TH. So dat for that. You can hear that in this clip.
They said I could participate online. They said I could participate online.
L vocalization. So that's an L turning into a vowel in a word like pool or pull. Might sound something like pool or puh.
He said that's cool, 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 cool. That's cool.
We also see consonant cluster simplification. If you have a series of consonants at the end of a word, you might see them turned into just one consonant. So in a word like west,
I'm not gonna lie, I don't even know what a consonant is. I should know from Countdown, which is like a UK show, but consonant, wait.
you might hear it pronounced as west.
It's been a minute, but she just left. She just left. She just left.
Okay.
And anything specific to New York?
One feature common in New York City is what we call a raised vowel in words like thought and cloth. It sounds something like aw.
Coffee without froth on top
Coffee.
isn't coffee at all.
Coffee. I love that.
So let's get it together.
Okay, let's go back to Eric.
Thank you, Nicole. And even that's just the tip of the iceberg for linguistic diversity in this incredibly diverse city. Around 50% of New Yorkers speak languages other than English at home. And for half of those, that language is Spanish. Megan Figueroa is here to tell us a little bit about one of those varieties, a variety linguists call New York Latino English.
New York Latino English is heavily influenced by Puerto Rican Spanish and Dominican Spanish. One remarkable feature of this variety is a light L, the sound that you would find in a word like, love, leaf.
Right, so New York Latino English speakers have a particularly light L. You can hear that in this native speaker clip.
I guess growing up, I know what it's like to not have a lie. I know what it's like to not have a lie.
In contrast to the light L, when you produce the dark L, the back of your tongue bunches. So think about the words milk and pull. The lighter L was a feature of New York Latino English. But Latinx people are a very diverse group of people, and they speak a variety of varieties. We'll get to more of those later.
Thank you, Megan. And this single feature is a good contrast with other New York accents, by the way, because most other New York accents have pretty dark L's. Lots of lemon lollipops, la la. I like to lick 'em. So now, as we leave New York and head south into Jersey and towards Philadelphia, we cross a major dialect boundary, the on line. Now, north of this line, most people say on, rhymes with don. South of it, they say on, rhymes with dawn.
It's weird to me how there's certain areas here that like say it differently, but then there's areas below it that say it the same way. So it does obviously mix a bit.
Of course, this doesn't apply at all if you rhyme dawn and dawn, only if you have two distinct pronunciations. That's called the cot-caught merger, but we'll talk more about that later. There are a few major dialect areas in the US, and one of the biggest dividing lines is between northern dialects and midland dialects. The on line basically runs right along this boundary. So as we cross over it somewhere around Trenton, we've crossed from the north to the Midlands, dialect-wise. Now, another thing that starts to happen as we get down towards Philly is that the goat diphthong starts to move forwards in the mouth. So we get go, hoagies. You want to go get some hoagies? Goat gets maybe even a little further forward as we get down to Baltimore, especially, you know, Danny Ocean. You want to go Danny Ocean on Wednesday? Let's make a quick stop in D.C., where Nicole has some really interesting stuff on the prosody of local African-American speakers.
In my research, I study prosody, which has to do with the tone and intonation of the phrase itself. In a study, I found that African-American speakers may be more likely to ask a yes-no question with a level tone or a falling tone. For white speakers, we expect a rising tone in questions like these. So something like, did you do the dishes? But African-American speakers may be more likely to say something like, did you do the dishes? Another feature that we see in DC, similar to New York,
It's so
is
weird
the
how it just varies between race and stuff. It's crazy to me.
raised thought cloth.
How like certain ways you just end sentences like that. Like some will raise it, some will lower it. Obviously, it doesn't. That's not every single person, but it is wild. It's really crazy.
This is a new feature in DC, and we think it's part of a pattern of DC varieties becoming more like northern cities as opposed to the south. You can hear that in this clip.
Change is needed, but at what cost? At what cost? Cost.
Okay, let's go back to Eric.
Now we take a quick detour over to Pittsburgh. Yous are the only people in all of North America that smooths the mouth diphthong, except for maybe Chicago sometimes. Now, smoothing is when you take a diphthong, like ow, and smooth it out so it's just one sound, ah. Just like we have price smoothing in much of the South, so that I smooths out to just ah, price. Same thing here,
Price.
except with the mouth vowel smoothing out to a long ah sound. Yins want to meet downtown, go shopping for catches? Heading back over to the Delmarva Peninsula, as we head down into Virginia, we get something different happening with that same mouth diphthong. Here it's going to sound like oat, mouth, house. So it's not smoothing out here, it's raising. The tongue starts a little higher up, instead of so it's like oat, a boat, house. This feature is called tidewater raising. Something similar happens with this vowel in Canada, and there we call it Canadian raising, but it's essentially the same thing happening. Time to get out of the house, keep heading south. Down in North Carolina, we really start to hear pretty significant goat fronting again. So the vowel sound in boat, most, hope starts with the tongue further forwards in the mouth, o. Interestingly, goat fronting, which is now widespread in a lot of the American South, seems to have originated in North Carolina sometime in the last part of the 19th century. Remember that regional dialect boundaries don't necessarily follow political boundaries. They follow settlement patterns and contact patterns between populations. So the inland part of North Carolina, which is in the Appalachian Highlands, the original European settlers were Scotch-Irish folks and Germans moving southwest from Pennsylvania. Due to being relatively inaccessible and isolated for a long time, the accent is distinct from the lowlands and from the coastal areas. The isolated speech communities are fascinating because we can get some really interesting sound patterns. Up here you get some really dramatic face lowering, for example. So the diphthong in face starts real low, down around face, light, die. You'll also get some particular dialect features, so words and word order and grammar things that stretch way back to those original settlers from Scotland and Northern Ireland. Things like a hunting and a fishing, and extra sounds too, like the R sound in wash and the H sound in hit. Get on with hit. Here's Nicole again.
Get on with it. Wait, what?
To talk a little bit about African American speech in Southern Appalachia.
I'm interested in this one actually, to see how it sort of mixes with like the white speech, as he sort of said, the African American speech. I'm intrigued. Is it similar?
Hi again. So African Americans in Appalachia are understudied, mostly because stereotypes of Appalachia are very, very white. African Americans in Appalachia may be more likely to be rhotic, so in words like floor,
Way up there on the fourth floor, floor.
You'll get the R, whereas in other places you might get flo. African Americans in Appalachia also tend to follow the more general Southern pattern with respect to I monophthongization, in wide turning to so you get wad. And now the map tour continues with Eric.
Thank you, Nicole. We're picking up again in North Carolina. Over in the Outer Banks, there's an even more historically isolated community because of a shift in shipping patterns in the mid-19th century, and probably also because of sympathizing with the Northern cause in the Civil War.
This sounds to me like what's it called? Fuck, where in England is this? Wait, let me just hear him speak again. Cornwall. I don't know why.
Also because of sympathizing with in the mid-19th century, and probably also because of sympathizing with the Northern cause in the Civil War. Ocracoke Island was relatively isolated from the mainland for a long time. It developed...
That sounds quite British. Wait, let me just search Cornish. Is it Cornish accent? This is probably going to be so bad, but like different. But oh god, I'm going to look like an absolute idiot, aren't I? Is it hear him talk? Yeah, hear him talk.
Well, as each Republican called on these head the doctor flip.
Oh, Trip.
Oh, Trip.
He's Fenner there.
I
know him.
And they say, what can we do?
It's quite quiet.
I'll come down and get him. We make how you go out there or one night.
It is kind of similar, to be fair. I don't think I'm that off.
A bigger beard for that, mind.
TV or in films, I understand you...
And rather thick is the expression we use.
Now, even I struggle.
This is even relevant. I'm trying to find talk, man.
Or stank. And yeah. That is Cornish. Stank. A tough walk.
Yeah, I'm not finding what I want to find. I don't know, to me it does sound quite similar though. Again, maybe because it's sort of out on its own and it's not like on the mainland, so like you said, it's kind of like secluded.
Also, because of sympathizing with the Northern cause in the Civil War, Ocracoke Island was relatively isolated from the mainland for a long time. It developed maybe one of the most distinctive and different dialects in North America. Obliging islanders will sometimes say to tourists, well, it's high tide on the same side. Last night the water far, night the moonshine, no fish. Ocracoke Islanders are sometimes called high tiders because of that particularly distinctive I sound. And their accent is sometimes taken to be British or Australian, even by Brits. And truth be told, there are some similarities with some regional English accents, including that high tide vowel sound, which is similar to both southwestern English accents, like Devon or Gloucestershire, and East Anglian accents.
Wait, me? I do not sound like that. Bro, you can tell if I sound like... I think Devon's next to Cornwall, so that's kind of what I meant.
Like Norfolk and Suffolk, those East...
So I was actually kind of right with that, to be fair. East Anglian, though, maybe like the sort of the farm regions, because I live in a city, maybe it's not as sort of typical. But I don't know. I don't really ever hear like a typical Norfolk accent.
In most counties of England.
I mean, you can tell me, do I sound like this guy right now?
Curiously, another distinctive thing about the old Ocracoke accent is it's also got a real sort of bounce to it, which is something that both those southwestern and those East Anglian accents also have in common. North Carolina is actually one of the most linguistically diverse states in the country. I want to bring in Kalina Newmark now to talk about Native American English.
Hello, my name is Kalina Newmark, and I am Talita Dene First Nations from the Northwest Territories, Canada. I come from a strong line of Dene and Métis leaders who are passionate about our language and cultural teachings. The Lumbee tribe is the largest state-recognized Native American tribe in North Carolina. Lumbee speakers combine and pronounce English words that distinguish them from African American and Southern speakers. Since encountering white settlers in the mid-1800s, the Lumbee have carved out a dialect of English that is uniquely theirs. One interesting feature is that Lumbee English speakers share vowel sounds present in the Outer Banks accent, where tide is pronounced toid. You can hear that in this native speaker clip.
Well, when he got halfway, that little ditch on this side, ditch on this side, ditch on this side.
Thank you, Kalina. So that Ocracoke Island high tider accent is an accent that's disappearing fast. The younger Ocracokers tend to speak much more mainstream American English. There's a popular idea that we're losing regional accents, that people are sounding more and more similar. That's true of some people in some places, especially some of these isolated communities.
I think that's throughout the world. I think it's because of like the internet and like TV and stuff, because like you'll sort of hear how actors sort of sound on TV shows and stuff like that, and you just sort of form your speech kind of around that. Or on like YouTube, you watch certain YouTubers who speak a certain way, and it just sort of, it will just influence you, and even if it's like unintentionally, it will influence how you talk.
Communities. But it's not true across the board. There are actually plenty of accent differences that are getting more and more distinct over time.
Oh, wow.
But of course, it's a complex picture. There are parts of the South that don't have all that much Southern about them, accent-wise. Raleigh, North Carolina, and Austin, Texas are two good examples. A lot of people from those two cities may be pretty hard to identify by their accents. Which brings us to what is sometimes called General American. What's General American? The first thing is, it's not one accent. It's basically a terrible term for a wide variety of accents that essentially don't have a lot of obvious regionally distinctive features in them. We're going to talk to Sun Michaud now. Sun is a native speaker of Gullah, a fascinating and really important Creole language spoken in the Low Countries in the Carolinas, Georgia, and Florida.
Gullah is a language spoken in a region of the United States called the Gullah-Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor, which extends officially from Wilmington, North Carolina, down to Jacksonville, Florida. Gullah is an Atlantic Creole, most similar with Bahamian Creole English and Bajan Creole. In fact, when I visited the Bahamas, a bunch of the local women thought that I'd been a local too. There are a variety of factors that inform the language. For instance, the secluded plantations on the Sea Island, a mixture of African languages, as well as the accents of lower class English and Irish indentured servants and slavers. European slavers were so ill-suited for the Sea Island's environment that they would often afford long periods of solitary time to our ancestors with little to no oversight. Slavers would mismatch the languages in order to confound them and hinder their ability to organize rebellions. Now, the scheme of this tactic was designed for our Gullah-Geechee ancestors to be forced to speak English so that their overseers could be privy to their communications. But what slavers didn't predict is that this first-generation English-based African pidgin would develop into a Creole, a fully mature rule-governed language of its own, much of which remains with us today due to generations of forced segregation and eventual separation by choice before the building of bridges that increased easy access to and fro. I'm going to walk you through a few distinct features of the Gullah Geechee accent. For example, the kit-foot vowels are reversed for the words fish and foot to sound like fush and fit. The lot trap vowels are reversed for
Fish
God
and
and pat to sound like gad and
Wait,
ox.
what?
For example, the kit-foot vowels are reversed for the words fish and foot to sound like fush and fit.
Fush and fit. Wait, really?
The lot trap vowels are reversed for God and pat to sound like gad and pot. The softening of the T's, where butter and bent would sound like butter and bean.
I'll go butter. I'm butter, not butter. Or how does he say it again? Butter.
Softening of the T's, where butter and bent would sound like butter and bean. Gullah speakers also
bean.
drop consonants for vowels where the two words meet. For instance, in the
I love this
sentences
video so
that
much.
gal there and that boy there, the word for there, adds or subtracts the D depending on if there's a consonant or a vowel preceding it. The importance of accent to the Gullah Geechee language simply cannot be overstated. It is the clearest bond between ourselves and other displaced Africans throughout colonized spaces in the Black diaspora. How we sound is as important as what we say, because our accent is a statement in itself. This has been your Gullah teacher, son Michaud. Stay safe, and as always, we out ya. Peace.
Thank you so much, son. So, if you're keeping count, that's 6 Southern accents already, even though we're not being remotely comprehensive here, and we've only been through a few states. Lots more to come. As we get into the piney woods belt, southern Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi, and northern Florida, we get into one of the parts of the South that's always been rhotic. A lot of the South was historically non-rhotic. That's where you get this sort of Blanche Dubois, Scarlett O'Hara kind of classical Southern accent. You can hear that in this clip here.
I've always depended on the kindness of strangers.
You hear how there's no R in strangers?
Strange.
That's a non-rhotic accent. But that's changed, and changed fast over the last few decades, so that most younger white Southerners are now rhotic. In most of the Piney Woods belt, though, they always have been. Now, Nicole talked about the fact that some African-American speakers in the Southern Appalachians smooth out the I diphthong, the price vowel in some words, and we get a long I sound. But in other words, it stays a diphthong, I. And this is a pattern we find in a lot of the South. In most of the Piney Woods belt, though, there's always been what we can describe as full price smoothing, where some Southerners smooth the diphthong in words like fly, rise, and ride, but use a diphthong in rice and right. Here in the Piney Woods belt, we're going to smooth them all.
It's
fly,
such a lead.
rise, ride, and rice, right, life, night.
Not delayed, like longed out.
And so on. There's an interesting posture thing here, too, which is that you start to get tongue tips that are very edge-focused. And what I mean by that is that instead of using this part of the tongue, the blade, for things like T and D sounds, so that there's a lot of surface contact, t, duh, we just use the narrow edge of the tongue, so it's a more focused contact area, t, duh. 10 tired turtles talk about dentists. We're going to end part 1 right here, but we're going to continue this all the way across the continent. We're going to go to Chicago and Southern California, and yes, absolutely, we'll get out in a boat up in Canada. See you next time.
A boat. I know that's a thing how Canadians say that. I'm definitely down to see more of these, and this was really interesting. I need part 2 ASAP. This is a really good video, and I appreciate you guys for suggesting this like crazy, because this was so interesting. These are my drop what you're doing and watch immediately videos. I need part 2. The fact he mentioned Rhode Island is great. It's like New York and Boston had a child. This dude literally at the point of understanding accents where he can just mix and match inflections like a smoothie. This dude is carrying wine. Is he like a consistent person on this channel then? Because he's really talented, to say the least. Really talented, man. I'm literally obsessed with this man's ability to pull off any accent he wants. It's talent, man. It's so impressive how he immediately jumps between accents. It must be so confusing as well. Give this man his own Netflix show or something. I'd literally watch hours of his content. yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to check out more of his stuff then, because I mean I'm gonna be waiting for part 2 and then more. But if you want me to see any more of the Wired videos from him, let me know what you'd like to see in future, and yeah, I'll be sure to do so. But until next time, like, subscribe, peace.